All right, so here are our guided practice problems. Hopefully you took the time to try them on your own. So our first guided practice problem is NH3. And so the first thing you're going to figure out is which kind of bonding we're going to do here. We know that N and H are both nonmetals. And so this is going to be a covalent bond. So we've got to follow our covalent rules. So we start with our central atom. We arrange our other atoms around. Now we're going to fill in our electrons. We're going to start with nitrogens. And then we're going to fill in our electrons from our hydrogen. So nitrogen now has 8 electrons. Hydrogen only has 2, but we know that hydrogen is okay with that. Next, we're going to look at Mg3p2. So we know that Mg is a metal. It's in group 2. P is a nonmetal. So this is going to be ionic. So we're going to be transferring electrons instead of sharing them. So we're going to start with our magnesium. And since it's in group 2, we know it gets 2 electrons. But we have 3 magnesium, so we've got to actually write magnesium 3 times. So now we've got our phosphorus, and phosphorus is in group 15, so it's going to have 5 valence electrons. So now, this is ionic, we're going to transfer electrons so that one has none and one has 8. So magnesium is going to be losing electrons, so my first magnesium is going to transfer 2 electrons to my first phosphorus. My phosphorus only has 7 though, so we're going to have to take 1 electron from my second magnesium as well. Now that's still got 1, so we start transferring to my second phosphorus. We're going to transfer 2 electrons from my last magnesium to my second phosphorus. So now we've got to draw out our final result. So my Mg, each of them lost 2 electrons, which gives it a +2 charge. We've got 3 of them, so we've got to write it out 3 times. And so now my phosphorus, each of them has picked up 3 electrons so that it has 8. So I'm going to draw P with 8 electrons, which gives us a -3 charge. So 3 more electrons than I used to. And I've got 2 of them, so I've got to draw it twice. And that's 1 electron there. All right, my next example, I've got CaI2. And calcium is also in group 2, so we know that calcium is a metal. We know that iodine, it's a halogen, so it's a nonmetal. So this is also going to be ionic. So we're going to start with our metal. Our calcium is, since it's in group 2, is going to come with 2 valence electrons. Each of my iodines, and we have 2 of them, is going to come with 7. And I'm going to transfer electrons. So I transfer 1 electron from calcium to iodine. Now iodine's got 8, so I'm going to have to transfer my other electron to my other iodine. And now I've got to draw my final result, which is calcium with no electrons, giving it a +2 charge, and iodine with 8 electrons, giving it a -1 charge because it's got one more electron than it had before. And now my very last example is going to be nitrogen, just as a gas. It's a diatomic element. So they're both nonmetals because it's nitrogen twice. So this is, of course, going to be a covalent bond. So there's not really a central atom because I only have 2 elements. So I'm just going to write my 2 nitrogens next to each other. And I'm going to do my 2 nitrogens in different colors so we can keep track of where my electrons are going. So we're going to fill in each of my nitrogen's electrons. So my first nitrogen gets 5. My second nitrogen gets 5. So at the moment, each of my nitrogens is only seeing 6 electrons, and we've got those single electrons just kind of hanging out there. This is not okay. We're going to have to move in some more electrons. So let's move in one more pair of electrons. So we're closer. Now each of my nitrogens is seeing 7 electrons. We've got a double bond, but we're not quite happy yet. So let's move in one more pair of electrons. Now each of my nitrogens is seeing 8 electrons because we've each got one lone pair, and then we're sharing 6 electrons to make what we call a triple bond because there's 3 pairs of electrons. So if we're going to rewrite this to just show the bonds, we would have N, 1, 2, 3 bonds to another N, and then each is still going to have a lone pair left over. So something else you need to add in your notes is elements that are allowed to have multiple bonds are going to be CNOPs. Carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur can all have double, sometimes even triple bonds. So if you've got extra electrons hanging out, you can bring them in and make another bond. All right, so now you should be ready to do the independent practice on your own. Ask questions if you've got them.